Thank you, Neil. Thank you for chairing so brilliantly, and thank you also to Sue for hosting us. I must add those words of thanks. I think it's great to be here with you physically today. You're right to push that idea, Sue. It is fantastic. It's great to see some great presentations, but isn't it even better to actually be able to engage with each other in the break and so on? I also didn't expect to have a recommendation on love at a presentation on digital retailing at automotive events like this, but it was fascinating to see. And on the theme of EVs, as Neil just mentioned, we wanted, in the absence of a panel session in a minute, we wanted to just pick up on the discussion that was kicked off brilliantly by Anita earlier. There's a huge challenge and a roadmap that John described about how we get from here to 2030 and the road to zero that has been outlined by our political leaders. The regulations are there. So I guess, first of all, I put a question to you. The regulations are there. So unless you assume there's going to be a U-turn, don't say the word another U-turn, then it's going to happen. I guess there's two ways you could look at it. One is, do you think we'll get to 2030 and have a sensible sized new car market of electric vehicles and a few hybrids that are still allowed until 2035? Or do you think we'll get to 2030 and we won't have managed to convince enough people to get on the electric bandwagon? We won't have democratized, as Catherine described it, and we won't have enough people, so the new car market will decline considerably? Or I guess going back to the first point, do you think there might be a change of tack and we just won't do it? So maybe I'll start with the first point. Who thinks we won't actually even get there? Anybody? That sort of negative mindset? Sorry if you say negative. That's fine. That's fine. It's fine. You're definitely not alone. And who thinks we'll get there, but the market will be much lower than it should be and historically was? You won't have a 2.4 million new car market. Who's in that camp? Yeah, quite a few. And who therefore is in the camp of we'll get there, we'll find a way to make it work, and we will have a decent-sized new car market? Okay, so that looks like probably the majority. It's probably a 60-30 split. I'm sure it'd be nice, 60-30-10, but hey, my numbers don't quite work. Anyway, so optimism in the room, but I think what we see, and it combines with all of the presentations shared today, is there are some clear areas for action that we need to sort of dig into, I think, as an industry, and with our government and political leaders as well. We summarise them as 3 I's. There's a need for greater incentives, greater investment, and a much greater focus on information. I think the folks who spoke earlier talked about each of those areas. So incentives, why? We've got to bridge the price gap. Until manufacturers are able to produce the cars more affordably with greater scale and economies and so on of scale, we simply have too many people that are priced out of the market. That's number one. Investment in infrastructure is clearly the number 2, investment in many areas, but if you don't see a supply-led drive to put more charging posts around your local area, the 40% of people that Catherine described that don't have their off-street parking solution where they could potentially do their own charging solution will really struggle to make the leap into EVs. So that's fundamental, and there's a huge challenge there. And in terms of information, I think that's where we also at Auto Trader, and I think across the whole industry, have a big role to play, and I'm sure Anita at Facebook too, because you need to know whether you can put your car in the car wash. You really do. And there's so many more important questions. We've got to standardize the jargon. Telling people how quickly it takes to charge a battery to 80% doesn't really say anything. For example, that should be, how many miles do I get for 10 minutes of charge? That's something I could probably compare this car to that car to and actually understand what I'm getting. That's just one element of a greater focus on information to bring the EVs to the fore and I guess bust the myths of EVs that are blocking at the moment. So those are the 3, I think, action areas that we take on board as ones we want to push. And I think we'll be on the same wavelength as our colleagues in the NFTA and SMT and across the industry, because that challenge out there of 2030, I don't think it's going to change. You clearly don't either. And we're all committed to it for the right reasons, the climate crisis point that John rightly highlighted earlier. So, moving on from electric vehicles, electric cars, forgive me, I need to get with the right jargon on that one myself. I want to talk to you today about the journey that we've been on in terms of digital retailing, along with electric cars and along with the other themes we talked about today, and agency was mentioned. This one really does, I think, have to be at the top of everybody's mind in the automotive ecosystem today, I'm sure in yours. And over the last 18 months or so, I think it's fair to say we've gone from what was, I think, described by many, notably we described as a massive forced experiment. We've gone from that phase through to probably a sustained level of focus on digital that means we do have a level of permanent change, a very positive change that's already embedded and also ahead of us. But before we talk further forwards about what's ahead of us, just going to wind the clock back a little bit again and remind you of the kind of image we saw on our TV screens very regularly. Every day, these folks and others from the government stood up and told us how to live our lives, didn't they? They told us how to run our businesses, basically told us almost how to close down our businesses. Car production ground to a halt, car sales ground to a halt, car usage, as Neil showed a minute ago, ground pretty much to a halt. And if you were back then in April 2020, with the doors of your showrooms shut and your forecourts out of bound to consumers, I'll put another question to you. What percentage back then, in your mind, of normal sales did you think that you'd ever be able to achieve in that sort of situation? Forget pandemic, the doors are closed. I throw a few sort of ballpark numbers out there. Anybody think you'd have done 50% plus of sales with the doors closed back then? Nobody so far. Anybody 25 to 50? There's a few more positive notes there, and maybe most of you probably in the sub 10% bracket, maybe? Anybody in that bracket? And I think there's no hands showing, there's no hands flying up. So that means you're all between 10 and 25%, or in that ballpark. But I think if you wind yourself back in your minds as to where you were back then, it was very, very hard to imagine that anybody would be coming through the digital doors to engage with a car buying process that hadn't been digitized enough. So we ended up in a situation of this forced experiment. The pandemic, out of necessity, forced change. And as the proverb says, necessity is the mother of all invention. And I think I put my words of congratulations along with Neil's. The industry adapted so incredibly well and fast to the point where, if you wind your clock forward now from April 20 to now April 2021, before we exited lockdown 3, we were tracking your sales of used cars that were averaging around 90% of normal sales volumes back in the comparative periods of, let's say, 2019. So to go from, I think, most people positioning a sub 10% number of what you could do to a 90% number still with the doors closed, I think is an amazing testament to the, as I said, resilience, but also adaptability of the industry. And where we are now with that foundation that's been laid and adding back in the benefits of the physical and returning customers into showrooms, the emotional side that we can re-engage with, we've got a foundation now to permanently improve the car buying experience. So what I'm going to talk to you about today divides itself into 3 chunks, if you like, 3 sections. Firstly, what's the consumer thinking about digital reselling? What's our research and our behaviours that we see of consumers on Auto Trader telling us? Secondly, what are the best resellers doing and what are they achieving by engaging with digital retailing? And thirdly, how it works in practice by taking a view over the Atlantic, looking at what's happening in the US and some best practices from over there. Firstly, just to position things a little bit from a consumer point of view, first of all. Consumers, I think, in automotive have wanted this for a long time. In other retail sectors, the engagement in terms of e-commerce and digitization has been far greater than in automotive. We've probably held the consumer back from doing more online. But they've now done it, they've enjoyed it, and they're telling us quite clearly that they want to keep doing it. So 2 in 3 want now to do most of their car buying jobs online. As Catherine touched on earlier, when you present a consumer with a really compelling, convincing and trustworthy online buying journey, you can get up to now 60% of people who are saying that they would consider buying a car even fully online. We don't believe we're anywhere near there yet, but people can imagine that, okay? So consumers want this, it's happening. And equally, the opportunity for retailers, and speaking with many of you before the meeting kicked off earlier and in other discussions, you know, you've done a remarkable job, but you've also got yourself in a very solid position in terms of market health because you've learned to adapt. You've sold often more, you've sold it often with less, so you've gained in efficiencies, you've delivered fantastic consumer experiences, and if, in essence, you've delivered, therefore, a profitability and ROI journey for your businesses, which stands you in good stead for today, but also puts you in a really strong position to future-proof your business for tomorrow. So great for consumers, great for retailers, and essentially the future, I mean, we've talked about this for a little while in Auto Trader and digital spheres. You've, I'm sure, engaged with this kind of discussion, but it definitely feels that the future is absolutely a blended model of reselling. And if we deliver on what the consumer wants, and what we now know is good for our business because of that forced experiment, we believe that we can actually fundamentally shift the value paradigm, if you like, in the industry and enable more people to buy more frequently and add value to automotive in the UK. So the opportunity is quite massive. So the first point now, I want to touch on consumers. As I said, the statement here is quite clear. Buyers want to do more online. It's a clear affirmation of all the data that we see. We touched on some points already during the course of the day. You start out, though, with a journey which most car buyers tell us is complicated. Now, when a car buyer begins the car buying journey, they look at the number of jobs they've got to do and they think that there's around 5. It isn't a linear journey, there isn't a funnel, there isn't a one step followed by another kind of journey. But in reality, when you look at it with consumers, and our research would tell you that they actually face 23 jobs to complete their car purchase. It's a long journey, it takes them about 60 days to do on average, a lot of snacking as they go through. And as they're doing these different jobs, they encounter a series of pain points, particularly the ones that are on this chart here. Pain points that get in the way, that complicate things, that frustrate them, that stop them going further, that stop them going faster, that stop them enjoying it, that stop them returning more. And it's solving these pain points that can really embolden, I think, the industry to step into the opportunity of digital retailing and seeing it as that, an opportunity rather than a risk, and to improve the consumer experience fundamentally. So, as I mentioned, we fundamentally believe we can improve consumer outcomes and enable consumers to buy cars more often. If you improve the frequency of transactions of cars, you fundamentally increase the size of the market. Catherine talked about an 8 million used car market that we expect for this year. We would have expected a 2.4 million or so new car market. Hopefully that'll happen again next year. If people cycle their cars more often, you can actually rotate your stock more often. It's good for the consumer, it's good for the industry. People want to do that. It's when the pain points get in the way that they can't, and they slow down. And again, as was touched on earlier, we don't believe in Auto Trader. I don't think many of you out there either are of the view that consumers want to do a full end-to-end online journey of car buying today. There are many jobs that are functional, that can be better done digitally, we'll come to that, but there are absolutely a massive amount of emotional aspects of buying a car, whether you're feeling, touching, driving, seeing a car and engaging with the advice of a retailer, where you don't do everything fully online. But what consumers are telling us is by not just wanting more digital, they want to be able to engage in a flexible way. They want to do the car buying jobs, those 23 I described, at the time and place and the manner that they choose in a flexible way. Okay? So embracing that is clearly a challenge for the industry, who historically, I don't believe today, I think we've all liked to think that there is one consumer. Now, in our categorization of consumers, broadly speaking, we think there are probably 3 categories now. There is certainly no longer a situation of one given type of consumer, so no one sales process would suit either. So there's a balance of these different types of consumer that's reflected by the size, if you like, of the picture, or the bar of these different categories. But firstly, you've got the digital adopters. The digital adopters, what are they? They're people who are clearly engaging with online buying opportunities in other retail sectors. You know, Catherine showed you earlier, roughly a third of retail in the UK is now conducted online. We lead all the OECD countries in that respect. We embrace that. Many people want to do the same in automotive, and they sometimes struggle if they can't do that, but they really want to do that. It's what they're used to doing. In the middle here, you've got the showroom reluctance. These are people who embrace the online opportunity. They like doing more of these jobs to be done, if you like, digitally, but they also enjoy getting some help, or they need to get some help to complete some of them with the advice and assistance and physical benefits of the retailer experience. And on the right, you've got what we call proactive showroom visitors. Those are the people who might well engage with some of the digital steps, but actually prefer many of the ways that they've been buying cars in the past, and they like to continue engaging very physically in the key parts of the buying experience that they still enjoy doing today and will look to do tomorrow. However, if I map how that might look tomorrow, this category of people probably will decline. It is probably a generational thing. We've touched on the sort of changing makeup of the demographics a few times during the course of the day. Demographics will be at play here. But as we get used to more digital solutions, we think more people will be fully digital adopters, but the majority of people will be wanting to do more digital, as well as the combination of that, the blend and the seamless blend, hopefully, between digital and physical. So that chunk in the middle is probably going to be the preponderant one. This is quite a significant shift of behaviors that I think will affect how we all go to market in the future. And fundamentally, buyers, as I've touched on before, would actually prefer to do a lot of the car buying online. And when you list out all the different jobs, they prefer to do 2/3 of them online. So embracing this opportunity, firstly, going back to the consumer point of view, it's bound to be good for them. That's what they want, that's what they're clamoring for, that's what they've got used to in other industries. And those categories I just described a minute ago, they will grow because of the demographics, but they'll grow as consumers embrace those opportunities to engage digitally in other sectors, and they'll grow as you all provide them with the opportunities to do these things, just as you did when you had no choice. That mother of all invention, necessity through lockdown, enabled this to happen back then. But as the consumers embrace that opportunity, that creates the chance for retailers that are first movers in this world to really grow their business through responding to a consumer need and a consumer preference. So on to what this really means now for the retailers, and what are the learnings we take away from what we see the best retailers doing in engaging with digital retailing. There are three standout chapters, if you like, to this story: technology, data, and experience. And I think the smartest retailers are already doing what I described. They're responding to the fact that there isn't one consumer, there can't be one sales process, and they need to be flexible in what they're providing, when and where they're providing solutions to enable a consumer to go down that non-linear and complicated route. Hopefully they can fluidify a little bit. If a retailer starts out, or a brand starts out thinking that they go fully digital, well, as I mentioned earlier, not everybody wants to go down that route. Very, very few people will be fully satisfied by that, so that's not going to work. You can't have one approach to them. And if you ignore digital, well, you're cutting off 2/3 of people, a third who want to do that fully digital journey, and a third who want the digital plus support. So you can't fail to embrace all three categories and embrace the need for modularity in how you go to market. So onto these three chapters, and what are the best people doing? I'm going to try and give an example of each. For technology to begin with, I'm just going to give an example of how retailers are using data, and in particular APIs, to take out manual tasks, responding to a consumer pain point, but also embracing this in a way that provides them huge value as retailers. You've got an example here of a car advertised online. Nearly everybody, 90% of people, will engage with car buying through various digital platforms. We will go onto a marketplace, you will go onto a retailer website, we'll go onto a brand website, and we'll flick from one to another in many cases. If the manual challenge of making sure all of the updates to those various places aren't done properly, you could end up with a situation here where one of these cars, in a fictitious example, is priced, well, the same car. One of the examples of advertising this car is different to the other examples of how we've advertised it. That breeds a level of distrust because it's lacking transparency in the minds of the consumer. You can see here, we call out 3 in 4 buyers worry that if online information isn't accurate, that's going to sort of turn them away from that particular retailer. It's going to turn them off that opportunity of engaging digitally. And equally, a large number of people, 7 in 10, are equally very annoyed when cars aren't removed from advertising platforms when they're sold. It's usually good news to take them off when they're sold. It costs you less money, but it's a manual task. So actually engaging this and making it happen digitally is an opportunity for retailers from a fundamental sort of time-saving point of view, as well as colliding with, very positively, the consumer preference for making sure that they can have something trustworthy online to believe in, engage with. So technology, through the use of APIs, is an example that's flicking through on the screen here of the car that's now shown on different websites at the same price, irrespective of which platform it may be shown on. Technology, through feeds, can take away the need for that manual task, so it provides consistency, it breeds transparency and trust in the mind of the consumer, and it saves time for the retailer. Fundamentally, many of the digital retailing tasks actually provide that double whammy, and it is a considerable benefit of both being a response to a consumer pain point and an efficiency opportunity for a retailer. So taking one example of looking at this opportunity with a large automotive PLC in the UK, we worked on how to implement the principle of APIs and data feeds, regular data feeds through the day, to a retailer group that up to then only had one feed in a given day and had very manual processes with people uploading and updating feeds through to different platforms and so on. You see here that made very considerable gains for that particular group. So you've got the equivalent of nearly 1,300 man-woman days, working days. That's around 6 people. That's ridiculously inefficient for the retailer. It doesn't add any value to the consumer for the pain points we've touched on. But not only that, by updating stock more quickly, given the typical speed of sale of this particular retailer group and the amount of margin they would typically retain on a vehicle, by showing cars more quickly that are ready for sale, let alone in this fast-moving market we're seeing today, there's a huge profit opportunity that would otherwise be left on the table. So you're ticking many boxes by engaging with tech opportunities, putting them at the heart of your business. Data, the second point now. Now, we've touched on pricing, I think, already during the course of today. Pricing data is, I think, more than ever at the heart of your businesses, data-led decision-making on pricing in particular. So you've got an example here of how retailers can use the Auto Trader retail rating data that many of you, I'm sure, will know. You've got a given car. This is a Nissan Qashqai shown in the southeast of England at the same price as it will be elsewhere. It's got a retail rating of 25, and it'll take 70 days to sell. By actually looking at where that car would sell best, if you're a retailer group with multiple locations, you can realize that you put that up in the Glasgow area, and you'll get, for the same car, a retail rating of 91. This is based on local supply and demand, and therefore overall market attractiveness. And that car will turn considerably quicker, and you'll sell almost 2 of these for the same time it would take to sell 1 of them down in the southeast. So smart use of data about where to put your cars and how to price them. To that point on pricing, this is an example taken as a snapshot right now of all the franchise vehicles that are on Auto Trader that are priced below the market level. Now that market level, as I touched on, has been growing rapidly over the course of the last 18 months. Following the data about what the pricing of your cars should look like, rather than editorial opinion, I think has saved the industry millions and millions of pounds. If you look at the current numbers that we're seeing on Auto Trader, we're seeing prices up more than 17% on a like-for-like basis based on prior year. So following the data saves an awful lot of money. Given how fast the market is moving, more than ever, you shouldn't have the 62,000 franchised vehicles sitting below market value today, therefore leaving around £36 million of profit opportunity on the table. It's simply not worth it. So embedding data into your businesses considerably adds value and performance. So I said the third point was around experience. So what do we mean by experience? Well, firstly, if you bear in mind that many of the things that buyers found possible and you enabled in terms of online performance through last year, that is the digital acceleration, forgive me, that has happened over the last few months that we're talking about here, needing to deliver. And we have all worked, I think, tirelessly over the last few months to start bringing to the market the kind of longer-term sustainable solutions that will allow us to take the next steps and to build on the foundations that have been laid. So we've got examples here of how a journey might look. And again, this isn't a linear journey. I might step into these different types of functionalities of reserving a car, getting finance online, checking my part exchange value at various different time points based on my own personal preference about how I like to buy a car and not how a particular website or a manufacturer or retailer process might tell me I need to buy the car. But bringing that to life is how, for example, I'm going to pick out a couple of the pain points we're trying to respond to here. It's how we can deal with both the pain point, responding to a consumer need and therefore driving additional opportunity to sell more, sell better, but equally to drive an efficiency gain. We've got the example here of the finance element of what I just described. Now, 2 in 3 car buyers prefer now to build a finance quote online. Now, a third will do that fully online, and a third are telling us they'd like to do it with a little bit of support. But fundamentally, that means that only a third of people will still be sitting at the desk of your business managers, asking them to stack the deal and leading them to do the work of all of that, and then propping the customer over to the most suitable lender and so on. So you need to ask yourself, what are they going to do with the remaining 2/3 of their time? There's either value there you need to reconfigure somehow, or get them to do a different job, but there's an opportunity for you in terms of efficiency. But as I said, if you go back to the other point of answering the consumer pain point, delivering what these people want, these consumers are saying is their preference, will actually lead to higher performance levels. You've got a couple of examples here of increase of both used and new car performance on Auto Trader when finance is part of the journey. So you deliver a response to a pain point, you've got an opportunity of pleasing the customer, selling more, and you can fundamentally improve the efficiency of your business. The same applies to part exchange. Second example, a quote here. So again, a similar number of people actually want to sort out their part exchange online. It is a painful part of car buying. When you ask the retailer to check out the value of your car, you're filled with trepidation. You think it's always more valuable than the retailer will tell you it is. But it's never an easy conversation for the retailer to have. And in our research, we can see that around a third of people are prepared to walk away when there's a disagreement on part exchange. Now, having been a retailer myself, and I can imagine all of you in this room, understandably would say as retailers, you would never let a customer walk away on a disagreement on a part exchange. And I'm sure that must be very true. But in reality, as things move online, you will see that The two-thirds of buyers are more likely to purchase from retailers who offer guaranteed part exchange values. So the customers you miss actually won't be people you even see. They will have engaged online and gone elsewhere and not given you even the chance to do the saving of the opportunity that you would have otherwise hoped to do face-to-face. Just going to skip on from that slide in the interest of time. So the three areas that retailers are focusing on to really deliver the digital retailing opportunity in its broadest sense are these areas of technology, data, and experience. And they tie in very clearly, equally, to the learnings we've taken from studying in depth what's gone on in the US market. And you might think as well, the US market, people talk about the US market, is it ahead of the UK or whatever? Now, from an e-commerce point of view, more generally on overall retail, the UK is actually well ahead of the US for various geographic reasons as well as many others. But from an automotive point of view, in terms of digital integration, I think it's pretty clear from everything we've seen that the US does lead the way. So we do have some interesting learnings to take from over there. I'm going to dig into one particular example in a moment after an initial headline here that shows from an excellent bit of research done by Roadster and NADA, the NFDA equivalent in North America, that there is a significant gain to be made in terms of, again, not just delivering consumer benefits, but retailer benefits in terms of efficiency if you sell more digitally. Many of you will have had, for example, the experience of closed showrooms when you had maybe 80% of salespeople back from furlough, and you were selling either the same volumes or slightly more volumes. You would have done similar numbers of improved conversion rates and improved sales executive efficiency as to what you're seeing here. But the in-depth point I wanted to touch on, as I just mentioned, is around CarMax. Now, CarMax isn't the likes of Kazoo, Cinch, and so on that Neil mentioned earlier, a pure online retailer. It's much more of a retailer akin to what you folks in the room are doing, a bricks and clicks retailer. They are, though, considerably larger than anybody in the UK in terms of overall sales volumes. They've got a market share similar to Arnold Clark over here, but obviously a much larger market in America, and a profit level which is clearly the envy of anybody in automotive. So I think there's some valid learnings to be found in anybody that's getting that kind of level of performance. The first thing that stands out in what they do is the consistency and the clarity of their communications around trust and transparency, as well as choice and experience. The headline on this chart, you can see it, is introducing Love Your Car Guarantee. There's a money-back guarantee. Catherine talked about how this has become part of the way we work now in the UK, forced again by that forced experiment, but still embedded now by many of you in the way you're going to market in the future. And we think that is likely to be a necessity for all of us going forward. They have a 30-day money-back guarantee and a 24-hour test drive promise. More on the experience side of what they do in a minute. But you won't be surprised to see that I picked on the three areas which we think they do brilliantly that tie into the points that I just touched on earlier: technology, data, and experience. So very quickly on each of them. Efficiency through technology. They embed technology in their business as a matter of course. It's part of their DNA, it really is part of their values. Their CEO comes from that sort of world of data, and it's in the way they do everything. They use technology to inform how they base their recommendations for each given user on their site, how they bring things to life on the platform, how they go to market, but equally how they look at how they can automate some of those manual jobs I described earlier. A great example of that is how they've recently updated their imagery technology, and I'm sure you will all have been grappling with different imagery solutions over the past years. You want to get the best solution, but you want to get it efficient. So they've done exactly that. They take great images, but they improve them through tech, and they bring out a very consistent high level of end quality that gives them both that gain of time and an improvement of consumer experience and a consistent standard they can apply to all their cars. So a great example of what they use technology for. In terms of data, I think they are outstanding in terms of how they lead the industry in this respect. They, for a start, have an awful lot more data scientists and analysts than anybody I know of in automotive. There are a couple of players over here in the UK that are well down this route, but not to the point where they've got 100 or so analysts now, a team that's been expanded strongly in the last, just in the last year or so even. But they focus their analysts on many important areas of their business, starting with what car to buy, where to sell it, and what to price it at. There is no site general manager or sales executive that's changing the price or deciding which cars to be selling. They're using data to do that. Now, there might be some opinion in some areas that might not agree with the data, but they are confident that the data will, over time, significantly improve performance. So they focus very much on using the data to inform those decisions and simplify their business. Now, thirdly, the consumer experience. I've touched on how they go to market with that long 30-day guarantee to pricing and so on. But there's three things that really stand out here. Firstly, their retail sales model. They don't pay sales executives a commission variable on the profitability of the car or the type of car or the age of the car in stock. It's the fixed price commission. They do have salespeople that are paid a commission, importantly. There's often debates about whether that's the way to go. But by paying people the same amount and having a returns policy in place, that informs the sales executive to the point that they know that they need to sell the right car for the right consumer. There's no point putting the wrong one that might earn them a bit more money. It'll come back if it's the wrong one. And they don't earn any more money anyway, so why would they? Secondly, in terms of buying cars, they don't just buy cars for part exchange and guarantee those values. They have a very proactive approach to buying in anybody's car. That generates some additional traffic, additional trust and confidence from buyers, and generates, obviously, further opportunities to know more about the consumer, use their data, and follow on potentially with a further sales opportunity beyond it. And thirdly, in terms of finance, finance is right at the heart of everything they do. They have a separate division on finance. They integrate lots of different lenders with a very efficient front-end solution and a CRM product within their sites. And they aim to actually let a consumer that visits to see a car that they've probably engaged about online drive away with that car that day, the majority of whom will take finance. Now, getting finance done quickly, if you've done part of the work online, is eminently doable if you've got the kind of systems these people have, and you're much less likely to avoid that be-back customer that actually doesn't come back. Equally, they're so confident of the fact that they've got this integrated panel that they'll allow you to take your car away with the finance that they've provided for you, a bit like you might have with insurance in the UK in many retailers. But if you want to change within 3 days, you can change to the finance provider you want. So a very flexible solution that helps drive their business model, I think, very well. So to summarize, from everything we see, it feels that the opportunity is both clear and really quite massive to engage fully with digital retailing. It's happened, first of all. Like I said, you did an amazing job keeping the wheels of your businesses going and then really accelerating the wheels of your business. So you saw that it works. It worked for your customers and it worked for your business. So it's what consumers have got used to in automotive, just like they've got used to it in many, many of the other retail sectors they engage with and have done more online with in the last year and so on. So they will probably flock to the people who provide these solutions first and best. So you have a first mover advantage to get ahead of the game. That won't last. I'm sure it will be the way we all do things going forward. And to that point, it will be the way we do things going forward. More of this blended digital retailing, clearly a lot of physical touch points, but more digital ones that will not only provide an answer to those consumer pain points, an efficiency gain for your business, a better ROI in the short term, but lastly, I think fundamentally future-proof your business for the long term. Thank you very much.